Ortho, one of the key parts of the incoming Trump administration China policy will be reining in its aggressive military actions and bluster, challenging U.S. interests in the Pacific and the South China Sea, especially what Beijing does, endangering Taiwan. So, how does the U.S. military stance toward Beijing expected to change under President-elect Trump? Retired Colonel Joe Buccino is with us, former CENTCOM spokesman. Colonel, good to see you. We know already by the two picks, the Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio, he was blacklisted by China. Mike Waltz, as a national security advisor, one of the harshest critics of China on Capitol Hill, he has said we are in a Cold War with China. They lay it out, lay it as it is. What do you expect to see from the new president?
Eric, what I expect to see is a combination of intense pressure and intense diplomacy. If you remember 2016, 2017, 2018, really beginning around 2018, President Trump really dialed up the tariff pressure and the messaging pressure on China. But at the same time, he cultivated a relationship with Xi. I think we're going to see the same thing here, where I think you've got some real China hawks here in Waltz and Rubio, and I also think that Trump is going to enter the kind of carrot and a stick situation where he is going to re-engage with Xi and re-enter that kind of one-on-one diplomacy.
What do you think is going on in Xi's head and the Chinese elite? Did they say, oh, good, Donald Trump was elected again, or are they saying, uh-oh, we're in for it?
Oh, I think it's the second one. I think right now Biden is a diminished figure on the world stage. Right now, he's, as you've seen in some of these images and the way he's been met in Peru. In China, President Xi is the most powerful leader since Mao. He's really expanded Beijing's influence all over the world. He's stepped up investments on our doorstep in South America. He's taking advantage of instability all over the world, the kind of limited regional war in the Middle East, the situation, the stasis in Ukraine. And I think they look at Trump, they look at President Trump a little bit the same way that China looked at Nixon, as kind of like this madman theory, where they're not exactly sure what he's going to do. They're not exactly sure what his next move is going to be, but they know he's going to be focused on intense pressure on Beijing.
Yeah, you talk about the investments. Xi visiting a $3.5 billion port that China built in Peru. As you know, they've been spreading their billions around the world, especially in Africa, as well as Latin America, to get Chinese influence. How do we combat that? Is there any way to do that when we've lost our position?
We've lost our position, but I think the way to do that and the way that President Trump and his cabinet selections are going to look to do that is to really ratchet up the tariffs, ratchet up the messaging, ratchet up the pressure, and at the same time try to re-engage one-on-one, this kind of personal diplomacy where Trump made outreach and overtures into President Xi. I think it was working. It was on glide path toward success here around the end of President Trump's first term, and I think that's the way they're going to approach it this next go-around. I think the national security policy and the national security strategy that comes out here in the next 6 months to a year under President Trump, I think will focus China, China, China. I think everything will have an outreach from China.
In terms of China, 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 Taiwan, 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 how will they threaten them? They've continued to do that under the Biden administration, poking that airspace, air defense space. Let me read you what the government, Chinese Foreign Ministry, says. The position is consistent and clear. The U.S. government needs to earnestly abide by the one China principle and prudently handle Taiwan-related issues. And here's what Taiwan's representative to the U.S. has to say.
It's not about which administration is in the United States, but rather what are the thoughts of Xi Jinping? He's not just focused on Taiwan, he's focused on the whole world. Taiwan's just we're the front line of defense of democracy, but he's also being involved in conflicts with Japan, with the Philippines. He may think that the world may not react to military aggression from an authoritarian regime.
And finally, do you think Taiwan is safer under President Trump?
Here's what I think. I think that in the early part of 2025, China is just going to try to see how far they can go. They're going to see what is Trump's red line here with regard to aggression with Taiwan. What's that red line? They're going to try to push up until they find what that red line is, and then maybe when they find it, they're going to try to spit over it. They're just going to try to see where does the Trump administration stand, how far can they go, what can they get away with. And I think really it's going to be up to the pressure that the Trump administration, these cabinet officials, that I think they're going to take their perspective directly from the White House. I think a lot of the national security and national defense strategy is going to be directed coming out of the White House. And I think that's what China is going to, and Beijing is going to be looking towards.
And finally, what would you do? What type of actions, if any, would you take that we haven't seen so far under the Biden administration? What would you suggest the Trump administration does to finally confront China?
Well, I think that, President Trump is looking at a 60% tariff on China. I think that the implications of that are going to be vast. I think the messaging around that is critical. I think that's something that the administration should look at. I think that's really something that is going to have an effect, perhaps a chilling effect on Beijing and its impact, and its implications in South America and its advances towards Taiwan.
Carrots and sticks, perhaps I hear from you. Start with the sticks, then get to the carrots.
Pressure and diplomacy. Pressure and diplomacy.
I prefer that. Pressure and diplomacy to the carrots and sticks. Joe Buccino, former spokesman of CENTCOM. Joe, thank you.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.